this is meant to be like open dialogue and to, hopefully answer a lot of tactical, relevant questions that you might have if you're marketing your company or if you're starting a business. So yeah, really excited to kick off. Like I said, this is a collaboration between Darkroom and Shopify. I'm Lucas. I'm going to be moderating the conversation. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Darkroom, and I'm going to be basically trying to weave some sort of narrative between these three disparate businesses. So in terms of us, we are a growth agency here in New York. We work with a lot of fast-growing Shopify businesses. We invest in CPG companies as well and commerce technology businesses. And before we get into questions for the speakers, I kind of want to center the stage and just provide some context in terms of where we're at in the digital marketing ecosystem. And then we'll go into some questions that I've prepped for these guys, and then open Q&A. And at any point, you guys can kind of jump in. But so just to kind of center the stage, in terms of just the crowd today, how many of you guys are familiar with marketing efficiency ratio, or MER? We can do just a show of hands. Does anyone know what that is? 1, 2, 3. Okay, yeah, the Darkroomers know what MER is. So MER is marketing efficiency ratio. It's calculated as total revenue divided by total ad spend. It is a measure for the efficiency of your ad dollars, or how effective your advertising is at driving sales. And what I have here are two graphs. One graph is showing, basically, actually they're both showing the past 2 years and how MER is on a steady decline. And so what does that mean? That means that our advertising dollars are becoming less effective at driving revenue. So you have to spend more money on advertising to drive the same amount in revenue, or if you keep ad spend constant, you might actually have declining revenue. So said differently, this is a bad thing for people who advertise. It means that advertising is becoming a lot more difficult. And so I think there are a couple of different factors that are happening in the macro environment that are precipitating the situation we kind of find ourselves in. One is the implications of consumer tracking. Another show of hands, how many people have heard of iOS 14? Okay, wow. It's pretty good. Cool, so that was Apple tracking transparency. There are a number of other privacy regulations that have been kind of ushered in and will be ushered in over the next 5 years. iOS 17, ITT, Privacy Manifest, loss of fingerprinting, and then there's a lot of legislature that's still a little bit hazy. But generally, what we can kind of all anticipate is a world where tracking becomes more and more difficult. And that's what the legislation will prescribe, but it's also what Apple is doing, leading the charge. They're saying, privacy is very important to the consumer. We don't want advertisers to be able to track them. So that's tough for us as brand owners, and that means that some of our traditional channels that work are no longer as effective at targeting. The other main trend that I'm seeing is the rise of like endless browsing mode. And I think this is a combination and a confluence of different factors, but one is just increasing competition. So there's so many people launching brands today. That's part and parcel because of Shopify. Thank you guys. Made it very easy for us to launch brands. But if you look at basically every consumer vertical, CPG, apparel, accessories, the list goes on and on, a lot more brands today than there were 10 years ago. And so what this means is that switching costs for the consumer are relatively low. If I'm shopping for a certain type of product, I'm probably going to get retargeted or hit with an ad from 5 similar brands, right? We've probably all experienced that. And so what the consumer experiences is like a tyranny of choice. They see all of these different brands, right? And I think that makes it very tough to build brand and to grow revenue. And the third trend that we're seeing that I think is a result of these two negative or situational things that we're experiencing is the rise of the importance of community and how community is actually creating moat for a lot of brands to grow. And what I'm seeing is the brands that are most effective at growing are the ones that are very, very diligent about creating community in an authentic way. And that's a very amorphous topic, but that's what we're going to be talking about today. So you guys are lucky, very lucky to be here. So we're going to be talking about building community-driven brands in a world of constant scrolling. And I think this is necessary for any business today who's trying to scale, definitely if you're digitally native. And so we've brought together 3 people I really admire. They're at the helm of, I think, 3 of the brands that are doing this the best in terms of cultivating community. I'm going to introduce each of them. So we have Jackie, the co-founder and CEO of Tinilux. Yeah, which I've known Jackie for over a year, and to watch her build this brand and be so at the helm of it, like really visually and in all of the content, has been incredible to watch. And for those of you who don't know Tinilux is a jewelry brand for sensitive skin. It's digitally native. It's a Shopify business. And we also have Tim West, the founder and creative director of Bandit. I'm sure if you guys have been in New York, you're all in New York, you've heard of Bandit in some capacity. I was introduced to Tim in November. We were on another panel together. And he has, since then I've followed Bandit, and I think they've created and cultivated probably one of the most engaged communities in apparel for sure, and definitely in running. The engagement is really something that we're going to delve into today. Last but not least, we have Kevin, who I just met today, but who I've known about Immi for a little while. It's a high protein, better for you instant ramen business. So consumer, CPG, in the food space. Kevin had a background in venture capital, and then founded Immi. So great panel here, and each of these businesses are building community in different respects. So I'm going to kick it off with questions. I'm going to help us kick off here, and then you guys feel free to kind of interject and ask anything that you want, and I have a section reserved for that. So let's start. This is going to be for all 3 of you guys. With an understanding of the current market dynamics, what we basically just talked about, how do each of you approach creating community for your brands? And Tim, let's just start with you, just because you have the mic, and we'll go from there.
Cool. All right. Hey, everybody. Good to see you. How do each of you approach creating community for your brand? So in the context of the graphs that Lucas just pulled up, I think, full stop, it's about getting the marketing mix right, making sure you're really efficient, balanced, where you're spending in all the right areas, making sure you've got healthiness in your channel strategy. That's the fundamental, I think. For Bandit, community is in our DNA. We are a community-centered running apparel brand. That's how we refer to ourselves. We have a community-centered design process. That is what informs everything we do, how we do it, why we do it. So what does a community-centered design process mean? Every single day, we are talking to our community and gaining insights from anything about what they want in their products, and that informs our collections, how our collections are made, what they look like, the performance features that our community is asking for. Otherwise, we're flying blind and making products that we don't know if people really want them, which would be a very, very risky strategy. But tactically, there's a lot of things that we do to engage community physically and digitally. We put on races, we put on marathon training programs, both virtually and in person. We have our own run club out of our store every Saturday. 150 people show up, get 4 miles in together. What else? We've got an amazing newsletter that is all about the community and what's going on, and it has a what's happening section, which I slipped in tonight. I see a couple of you who definitely read that and are here. So thank you for coming, Patrick, especially. But yeah, I think for us, it's just about really understanding this is all about the community. It's not about us. It's not about our product. It's about the community, making sure that they feel heard, seen, special, included. It's just, I like to really think of Bandit as like part of the hospitality industry in a weird way, but we're really here to cater to them. And yeah, they're just at the center of everything we do. So that's kind of a broad answer.
No, it's good. I think it'll set the stage for some of the other questions that I'm going to ask. This is definitely more surface level. Yeah, Jackie, how do you kind of approach the question, and how have you thought about this with Tinilux?
Yeah, so we sell earrings. That's our primary product. So, taking someone buying a pair of earrings because it solves a pain point to then keeping them engaged and entertained over years and years of being a customer is pretty challenging. But the way we think about it is just trying to inject ourselves and our personality into every stage of the customer funnel. So like a new customer, they want to know our brand story. They want to know why I started the company, and that convinces them that they should join our funnel. But then from there, they don't need to hear our story 100 more times. They've already been convinced. So at that point, it's more about showing the behind the scenes of our team and injecting that into some things that are scalable and some things that aren't. Sometimes we have blog series that are not necessarily the most scalable thing, but we're able to use those to build up our brand values and strengthen that within our community. And then there's other things like using our UGC content in our ads. That's scalable and that's more doable, and that makes customers feel connected to us long term.
Can you take us through that founding story really quickly?
Yeah, definitely. So I just had extremely sensitive ears, and I couldn't find any earrings that worked for me. This was like a years-long problem, and I knew like a lot of other women who had the same issue. So one day I was like scrolling Instagram. There was this influencer that I was obsessed with. She did this big collab with Bobble Bar, who sells jewelry. And I wanted to buy like every pair of earrings that she posted, but I was like, I can't because they're gonna irritate my ears. So then I just started digging and trying to find a solution. I stumbled on a medical implant manufacturer's website who was talking about the benefits of titanium. Titanium is always used in medical implants because it doesn't react with the body. So that kind of clicked to me like, oh, maybe that would work for earrings. Then I couldn't find any earrings made with titanium. So at that point I thought, like, I have this problem, I have a solution. I could be the one to create the solution for everyone. It started really small. I was still working at the time. And now here we are 5 years later, and it's growing every year.
So with the authenticity of like, hey, we're solving a problem. I had this problem that's deeply personal. Do you find that people really resonate with that, and they're like, I have this issue too?
Absolutely. So my tendency as an engineer is to sell the product values, and that can be a little boring. And it's also not necessarily. So this is our product. We have to get people over this hump of like, I'm skeptical. I've tried other things. How do I convince people that like your product is going to be different than everything else that I've tried? So me putting my face on the website and saying like, I stand behind this product with my name and I had the same problem as you and now it works, brings so much more authenticity and trustworthiness to the brand.
Do you engage with customers? And I know, Tim, you do this quite a bit. How do you think about that, Jackie?
I do. I mean, I used to do customer service myself, and sometimes I still answer customer service emails. But we use an app where it's, my face telling the brand story. People can click through. They can see different like frequently asked questions with me answering the questions. And I think that little piece of video content really helps a lot.
And so, yeah, Tim, let's actually go back to you really quickly. Let's double click on, you mentioned a lot of different things. The Run Club, some of the events that you do regarding marathons, like you're pretty front and center in the community, and I think this is a theme and a through line. How do you manage that with like running the business? And, can you just talk more about it?
Yeah, sure. As far as most people know, like I'm not a figurehead of the brand. I never have been public facing. I've never been on the Instagram, or I've never put my face on our story. I'm scared to talk to the camera. I'm always like wildly impressed by people who can do it. And that's a personal issue, but we're growing and we're getting on panels and it's great. But I love engaging with customers on a one-to-one basis or at a group run, and I love like running our club, and I love being on set with our community members when we're putting together new campaigns and doing stuff like that. Like I love being hands-on with the business and at the community, but like at the scale of, social, I'm still hiding a little bit, and I think I will, because ultimately, like, we're not, when we were a sock company at first, yes, I solved a problem that was like unique to me. I couldn't find a really good pair of running socks that went the distance, but I didn't feel confident enough to really put my, face behind it. And it's not about me, and that has nothing to do with Tinylux's strategy. There's so many different ways to go about it. But for me, I just like always felt best about putting the emphasis on other people. So yeah, that's just where we're at.
Thank you. Kevin, let's take it to you. Opine on some of the stuff we've been talking about.
Yeah. So I think our approach to community, we tried to be very intentional in the beginning, just because my co-founder and I actually, before working on Immi, we spent the past decade in the tech industry. And my co-founder was actually at Meta. He was building features to help creators manage their communities. And I had previously grown and run the world's largest online community for product managers. So we both knew we wanted to take that community-driven approach into Immi. And I think what's funny is our community has, how we approach creating community and really the purpose of our community has evolved over time. In the early days, it was just me and my co-founder. We didn't come from the food industry. We had to learn like food science and just like make stuff in our kitchens. We made the first 200 versions ourselves. So our community back then was just us in a Facebook group with people who discovered our brand on like subreddits, and they were just curious to see how we were going to create this brand new product, this brand new category from scratch. I think a lot of them were just like, I don't think these guys are going to do it, but we would just post like photos and videos of us in the kitchen messing around, and it was just kind of like a fun build in public experiment. And then I think over time we started to realize, wow, these people are like super passionate. We can even do like surveys. We can send them early design mock-ups of the packaging, and people would actually give us like really clever feedback, because some people in the group were like packaging designers. They'd be like, you didn't even think about this and how it's going to work on retail. So that kind of evolved over time. And then when we launched, it was just amazing, because the community really went to bat. They had been in that community for, I think at that point, 1.5 years. Some of them just felt like they were...
This was like a private Facebook community?
Yeah, it was a private Facebook community. We picked Facebook because at the time we did a lot of demand testing before we built the product, and we realized a large portion of our initial audience was actually a 35-plus female. And my co-founder and I, working in tech, we actually knew that audience tended to live on Facebook. So we didn't really want to overthink it, no fancy Discord, Slack groups, we just did Facebook groups. You also don't have to worry about like having synchronous communication. People can just like leave a comment in a thread at their own time, and it will still feel like it's an engaged community. So yeah, we launched, and then the community went to bat for us. Like they would fight trolls and they add comments for us. They really like blew out our initial sales. And then when we launched in retail, they also would like go into Whole Foods and like buy out the entire shelf. And so our community is really mobilized for us, and we're super grateful. But yeah, it was intentional, but not intentional. Like I think the power of it and what it is now.
How do those, how involved are those people now? And do you have relationships with them? I'm curious.
Yeah, we have many direct relationships. I just said happy birthday to one today. He's been with us since the very early days, and he joins all of we do Facebook Lives when we announce new products, and like he's always in there. There are many members in there that just like we've grown, honestly, to like really appreciate and become friends with over time. So a lot of them are families who always like share photos of their kids eating Immi, and we'll just like surprise them by just mailing extra Immi to them, and it's always like it's a huge customer delight for them. But yeah, we're pretty engaged. There's about 8,000 Immi like evangelist members in there now, and it really just grew organically. People are posting recipes, photos. People bring like Immi to like Switzerland and their trips, and they'll like show us their like suitcases or they're packing it. So it's pretty cute. Yeah.
So just to be clear too, that's that same Facebook group, and you're still product testing and taking that lean startup like iterative mentality in your product development process too?
Yeah, definitely. We are we try to be pretty conservative with how we spend. We have a raised venture, but I think for us, like when we initially were gonna do like taste testing, we went to these like third-party groups, and they were like, "We'll charge you $25,000 to find a simple random sample of like 20 people across the nation. We'll get their feedback." And we were like, "Why would we pay that? We have a community." So we run our own like pre-qualification surveys to kind of filter participants, get like a decent representative sample of people across the U.S. Then we'll like ship them product, and then we'll have like post surveys where they taste the product on different dimensions, and we can actually get a pretty good like representation of what the general population would think about each iteration of our product from a taste perspective, and it cost us like less than $1,000 to do this at a huge scale.
Okay, so there are obviously cost synergies. What he's describing is like basically creating community as like an asset almost for the business. I'm curious what like the investment is in that. So I'm sure you have like community managers now. Still just you guys.
It was me and my co-founder for the first 2 years. I was in there responding to every single comment. If you go in there today, there's not a comment that's unresponded to in the early days. Now it's a little harder, and I think one of our team members has really stepped up to try to be like a new character in the cast. Thank God, because it's like before we were like, oh my God, like we have to post every week and like respond to everyone, and it was a lot of work, but I think it was totally worth it. People in the community just trust us versus like, we're not a faceless corporation. And so they've really like been able to forgive us for a lot of the mistakes we've made. The first version of our product we launched was not that great. And they stuck with us through that because they got to watch us build, and they just like really believed we would do better.
Basically like giving them ownership almost in product development and just being a part of the business. I'm very curious, how do you measure like the impact or the effectiveness, or it's just one of those intangibles that you're like, this is an asset for us?
Yeah, it's one of the questions. We don't measure anything. There's no analytics.
No.
We don't have success metrics.
Oh my God.
It's embarrassing.
Gotta talk, Kevin. I'm glad we met.
I know. It's embarrassing. I think my co-founder and I are we are very data oriented. We both worked as product managers. We were investors for a long time. But I was like, redeem myself.
Okay, wait. So take me through the pitch. You mentioned you raised venture then. What do you? I mean, going through when you talk about the community and just like KPIs, you're just like, this is a huge asset for us. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, we talk about it because the proof is in like. We don't measure like, oh, this is how many posts are happening, this is how many, like how much engagement we get per post. What we show people is, we'll be like, look, we launched in Whole Foods last year as a test trial in 5 of their regions. The Whole Foods buyer wanted to test us. We made a post in our Facebook community, and literally like for the next week, people would just send photos where they were like, I bought out the entire shelf. I even bought the box that the packets are in, and I brought it to the cashier, like, can I keep the box? And then we mapped that, like literally when that happened, to our retail velocity data, and there's a very clear correlation of like, you can't fake retail velocity data, and also our product is like $5.99 at Whole Foods, so it's like if one person buys one, you jump like by $1 velocity, like considerably. So it's pretty clear cut that there is a correlation. The other thing that we use it for is actually for like long-term, like so for example, when we launch with a new retailer, or we're trying to pitch them, we will go in our community and we'll say, hey everyone, would you guys like to see us in the fresh market? And we'll get like 300 comments of people being like, yes, I'm near a fresh market, I love it. And we'll take a screenshot of that and we'll send it to the buyer. And the buyer will be like, oh my God, there's built-in demand. Like why would I not want to launch you guys? And so there's clear benefits from like that sales perspective as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Tim, let's go back to you. So running is inherently cultish. I just learned this. I'm not a runner myself, but I've been talking to Tim, and he's like, oh, yeah, it's a total cult. And so I'm just curious, how do you break into something like that? Especially from my understanding, you started the business as you were becoming a runner. Am I right?
No, I've been...
Yeah, just correct me.
Sure. I was a college soccer player. I grew up playing soccer. That was my main sport. But always trained for soccer through running, and then after college decided I wanted to be competitive with myself and not in a team sport. Got really into ultra marathoning, fell in love with the mental side of the sport, started going those long distances where my socks didn't hold up, and then one thing led to another, and now we're here. That's the sort of story there. Cultish, yes, there's running cults for sure. I'm gonna make this about something else. So one of my favorite like anecdotes here is when Nike entered skateboarding. Skateboarding, extremely hard to break into sport. There's a lot of authenticity, a lot of history there. There's people who shouldn't be on skateboards at skate parks getting made fun of. It has like a bully culture. It's like, it's a tough sport. And you have to be really authentic. And so how does a brand like Nike, who makes running shoes, go into a sport like skateboarding where most skaters don't want them there? They want the independent brands that are born out of the skate shops locally in Santa Monica and things like that. What Nike did is they figured out, and they just spent the first like 2 years figuring out what do skaters care about. They care about skate parks. They care about spots, like skate spots, historical landmarks that are really rich with history and are important to the skate culture. They care about being able to have explicit music in their videos. They care about style and swagger and like the subjectivity of skating. And so Nike, when they entered skateboarding, they started off by building like skate parks all around the country and saving landmarks that were taken away from skateboarders, and they brought them back, and they worked with local governments, and they hired or signed like guys like Nigel Houston, who's like the swaggiest skateboarder in the world, and they came out with videos that were like totally badass, and they just didn't come in as like a corporation. They came in like another cool kid on the block who's been there before, and I think that's how you break in and establish your own subculture. You figure out what people care about. And for us, we figured out what runners care about, and then we just made it happen for them. Runners want amazing resources when they're training for like the biggest moments of their careers. They want the best products. They want to know where the water fountains are and what the best water fountains are and where the bathrooms are along a route. And they want you to have a water cooler outside your store. And if you come in, you can use the bathroom. And there's just like so many little things that you can do right to show up and to care and to like really do things that people are like, that's awesome. You're coming in. I respect that. You're working with amazing runners. We'll get into more about that later. But I love that like story about how that's how you kind of got to show up.
We've got some technical difficulties. If we can fix the prompter. Yeah, so in terms of like just you creating a branded experience that resonates around that, like a lot of the things that you're talking about are physical and they don't really relate to, you know, an apparel brand. How did you make those? How did you connect those two?
It happened very naturally. So Bandit was born at McCarran Park Track in Williamsburg. I was part of Brooklyn Track Club, and I created this sock that I needed that was sweat wicking and very breathable and had perfect amount of spandex. The story, my founding story is I was like a diehard Nike guy, if you can't tell by how much random knowledge I know about it. But I was a diehard Nike, started running ultras, their socks. I was poking holes. I was getting like really, really sweaty feet by the end of the run. I was like peeling the socks off. It was a whole thing. Googled best running socks and couldn't find anything that resonated with me. It was all these brands with like silly patterns and colors and like just not my vibe, coming from like 20 plus years of Nike minimalism and design. So I decided to make my own and called it Bandit because there's no brand that's from no real big flag waving New York City running apparel brand, which is crazy because we're the global hub of running culture. Biggest marathon, biggest half marathon, most clubs, most runners of any city in the world. And Bandit, a bandit in running is somebody who runs a race without registering. The first person ever to do that was Bobby Gibb in the 1966 Boston Marathon before women were allowed to run. So we named it felt very New York. We named the company after her. And it felt very New York, but like very empathetic and very understanding. And that's sort of how it came to be. And then it really struck a chord with New Yorkers, and people felt like this brand really resonated with them, not having another brand. A lot of the brands that were getting super popular in New York at the time were from New England, or from Portland, or from Germany. And New Yorkers, we like our black and white, we like our neutrals, we like our minimalism. And so, building it on the track, I just had a group of built-in friends. It just so happens runners are very highly photographed. They want pictures of them hitting that float stride where both their legs are off the ground and made the socks look really good. And when you have a really supportive group, all wearing the same sock, tagging, making it look really cool, it can kind of take off pretty quickly in New York, where people want like a trendy but trusty product. And there was this whole like FOMO thing that was happening with me running it by myself and it always being sold out because I needed to get my money back before I bought the next batch. And lots of happy accidents along the way that kind of got it to where it is. But it's a whole confluence of factors and lots of luck, lots of hard work, but yeah.
Yeah, so I think you spoke to like density being in New York, like having that be a part of the strategy. I'm just curious for Jackie and Kevin, have you guys thought about that in starting the brand?
For me personally, the product that we have spans every age, every demographic, so there's almost no way for us to establish that like in a certain location with density like how you were able to do that with New York. So that's definitely been a challenge for us. Like, how do we reach those pockets of people all over the country that have the same problem? So yeah, that wasn't, location-wise, wasn't necessarily something we thought about. It was more just, my strategy in the beginning was Google. Like, I knew that people that were looking for this product would be going to Google, so we wanted to establish ourselves there first.
Yeah, it's like it's a complete need for the product because you have that white space, which we will come back to. What about you, Kevin?
Same thing. I think most people like ramen, hopefully, but we did not try to concentrate in a specific area. I think for us, it was actually interesting because ramen culture, especially on like bi-coastal regions, is much more developed. Like I think New York, California has a lot, and I would say if you're like hardcore into ramen, you probably would find Immi different because we're low carb, high protein, plant based. It was like, we were trying to invent something new, and I think for the purists, like that actually was the opposite of our audience in the early days. To be. Yeah, so a lot of our customers actually in the early days did come from like Middle America and like where ramen culture or just it wasn't as accessible to find a ramen shop, and they just wanted some way to get ramen in their home that also was healthier for them. So,
who is the main customer today? I'm just curious.
It's still so. It's really hard to answer that question. We've tried to figure this out ourselves. I would say it used to be that 35 plus like female. Now it's like 60-40 female male. It is like probably 25 plus. I think generally speaking, like you've graduated, you have some discretionary income. You're probably health minded, and that's like the very raw demographics information. But in general, like even our ads now and stuff, it's all like Miss Ramen. And like it's like anyone who probably ate ramen at some point in their life, but just stopped because we realized how bad it was for us.
Yeah,
and that's a really big audience.
Really big TAM, which is good. Jackie, let's go back to you. And this question is basically just how has, obviously when you started the company, it was very intimate, personal issue, personal problem that you were solving. How has that changed as the business has grown and at your size today?
Yeah, actually I was much like Tim in the beginning where I felt like it wasn't about me and I didn't want to make it about me, even though it was my pain point. I wanted to make it more about the customer and more about the product. So I really resisted putting myself front and center. I was on like the about page, but I was not putting myself out there on social, et cetera. And it kind of changed based off of TikTok. I had a couple TikToks where I started just answering customer questions, and some that really went viral very quickly and drove a ton of sales for us. So that's when I realized that like people actually do care about me and the story behind the brand, or just putting a face to the brand. So since then, I've tried to put myself forward as the face of the brand a lot more. But then as we grow, I want people to, or we want Brittany's here from my team. We want to show everyone on the team more, so people feel like they see like the community of us behind the scenes. And I think each of us within the team have different areas within our personality that can connect with a different type of customer. So, for example, I might be talking about the behind the scenes of the business, whereas someone else on the team who's a mom might be talking about her work from home life with her child, et cetera. So that's kind of how we're trying to inject and build that community as we grow.
And Kevin, that's pretty similar to you as well, right?
Yeah.
I've seen some of the posts at least where you and your co-founder are pretty front and center.
Definitely. We also tried to not be in the limelight in the early days. We thought that for the longevity of the brand, we shouldn't be like the face of the brand. And unfortunately or fortunately, I think both of us kind of are more comfortable now with the idea that, hey, people do follow the brand, and they've always followed the brand, even the community, because of us and what we were trying to do in the space. I think our mission is pretty personal as well. We really started Immi because our families have chronic health conditions. Like my grandmother's pre-diabetic, and both my parents have had high blood pressure for over a decade. And so I think when people hear that story, they truly believe that we are building this for the right reasons, and I think that really draws them to us. So no matter how much we test different ad creatives, the founder's story always continues to outperform. And it's the one, like, people on the street will be like, hey, you're the Kevins, because that's like one of the iconic ads that we have.
That's I think the first thing I said today. I was like, your co-founder's name's Kevin.
Yeah, we got lucky there.
So how much ramen do you eat? The important stuff.
Yeah, no, it's actually funny. When people come into town to visit, they're always like, oh, do you want to eat ramen? I'm like, God, no, I really don't want to. I eat Immi probably like 3 times a week for lunch. It's just really convenient. I like it. Like, I actually enjoy the product. Outside of that, I don't eat that much ramen in the city. People ask me like my favorite ramen shops. I'm like, I've probably been to like 3 since moving here a year ago. Now, for any particular reason, I just, it's one of those things where you work on something day in, day out. It's hard. It's like a chef going home and just making a peanut butter sandwich.
Yeah.
Not that I'm a chef, but yeah.
So you you spoke to this a little bit, but I think food is pretty particular because it's high velocity. You're consuming it pretty frequently. Are there any other tactical things that you did launching the brand that you think is relevant for these people here?
I think for us, we did do a lot of really weird, like, unscalable things in the early days just to get ready for launch. Like, by the time we launched, we had an email waitlist around like 38,000 people, and at the time our community was, I think, around 3,000, so it was smaller then. But the way we built that was we did all sorts. One of the things we did, for example, is like we found this bot that would scrape all of Reddit, and anytime anyone wrote like low carb noodle or like healthy noodle or low carb ramen, it would ping us in Slack, and I would click in, go to the posts, I would like leave a thoughtful response and link back to our landing page. And when you have like a really thoughtful response, and if that thread goes viral, you can get 500 to 1,000 emails in like 5 minutes. And so we used to do stuff like that. We also record, like when we were in R&D, we didn't really have a product. We would take our own noodles and we would film ourselves in the kitchen making recipes with them, and then we would cut them into like these 10-second GIFs, and we'd post them in the like keto or food subreddits, and we would consistently just be like in the top 5 for like weeks at a time, and that also drove a lot of email signups. But the point is like anyone who came to our email list, we were drip sequencing them to get them into our Facebook community, because an email list, you can blast people, great, but in a Facebook community, they're talking to each other, they're sharing photos, like they really feel connected to the brand. So we really nurtured that community, and they really showed up for our first month of launch and like blew it out.
How do you mobilize them today? You mentioned it's 8,000 now?
Yeah, we mobilize them. It depends. So we think of our community as like a mini strike force. I mean, there's a reason again why we don't, I think, measure like the analytics or anything, is because that community has really evolved to not be like a revenue generating, like direct revenue. We're not trying to measure each post equals this much revenue. We think of them as, we have specific special projects we need help with. The community is going to be the most engaged and most likely to act on those special projects. So a special project might be, we need to figure out what are our next 3 flavors to launch. We will do extensive surveying in the community, try to remove as much of that bias, as, the confirmation, or I don't know what bias it is, selection bias as possible.
Confirmation bias, or
something like that. And then that's like one special project. The other special project might be, we need to build a relationship with our Whole Foods buyer. So we will, like when Whole Foods decided to roll us out nationally a few months ago, we asked the community to just like share their love, and we sent a photo of all of that engagement to our Whole Foods buyer, who then was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I haven't seen anything like this before. That's like a special project related to building that relationship. And so I think we've kind of just thought about them this way. Or if we need to get like UGC, we'll just straight up ask people in the community, like, can you send me a video of you eating the product and saying these things? And it's just free ways to get like creative. So I think that's how we...
Have you done anything in real life with those guys?
We have not. We are horrible at real life stuff. I could learn from these two. It's not that like, I don't know why we haven't. It's just maybe we didn't have the resources before. I think it's expensive to, we can't just like go and like lay out our product or give out, like you kind of have to set up a ramen bar and like do all sorts of stuff. So instead we've really focused on digital community. And it's funny because I think when we launched, well, we started this business during COVID and a lot of people were just lonely, frankly speaking. And instant ramen especially is known as a very lonely product. It's like, kind of like picture yourself like guiltily eating it at night, like alone. And I think like it was wonderful when people came to this community, they realized that they could just like share their bowl, like a photo of their bowl, and like talk to other people while they were like experiencing their ramen. And they would even like brag to each other how they like styled it and like try to one up each other. And I think that in of itself has been a way to make instant ramen feel social without getting people in person.
And to run this community today, and when you started, it's free.
It's free, yeah. If you are on an email list, you can join it. Yeah.
Yeah. So
we do ask for we do user interview, or like, so when you join the community, we do user research. So every quarter we change the 3 when you join any Facebook group, you can ask 3 questions. And so we ask like, when is the first time you heard about Immi? Or like, what convinced you to buy Immi today? What almost stopped you from buying Immi? What influencers do you follow? And then that creates like the leads list for our like senior partnerships manager to reach out to influencers. So we do a lot of user research, but that's the only cost to join. Yeah.
Super interesting. Tim, let's go back to you. So obviously we talked about density, New York-driven brand, owning running here. You guys are fundraising. And I think looking to really expand this brand. How are you thinking about how community evolves and how you maintain the integrity of that as you move out to other cities?
Yeah, great question. Running is such an amazing industry to be in because there's so much built-in moments for you to take part of. We show up to a lot of marathons around the world on a calendar basis. So New York City, huge. It's like our Super Bowl. Boston, I want to go to Tokyo one day. London, Berlin, Paris, LA, Miami Marathon. There's like, you could fill up the calendar with all of these races that have expos and big weekends and lots of events. And that's like our bread and butter, is like elevating those weekends and making them really special and adding to the programming of it. Because it's just like it's the crescendo of 16 weeks of your hardest working, not just in running, but like balancing the rest of your life. So that's kind of built in. That's how we sort of travel around. We also do a lot of digital stuff. We just launched a 16-week marathon training program virtually in partnership with ASICS. We've got about 6,000 people in that, all rowing in the same direction for the New York City and Chicago marathons. I'm sure there's some Philadelphia people in there as well. And every single week they're getting advice across running, strength, mobility, recovery, nutrition, and sports psychology, which is like a very new, under kind of spoken about topic, which people are loving and I'm loving. And so we're serving people virtually. We also just launched our first Strava challenge. If you're active, cycling, running, hiking, you're probably on Strava. We have a 7-day challenge going right now. We've got a little over 60,000 people in it. And those people, if you finish 2 hours of activity, you get Bandit prizes, you get entrance to win some limited edition stuff. And those tools are really great, and they're there, and they make sense. Like going back to the very first thing we talked about, like that's one non-iOS, like that's a workaround, right? And that's a great platform for us. So we got the marathon training program, we got Strava, we got our marathons where we're traveling around. And yeah, I mean, that's the bulk of it. We're able to reach like a pretty large audience.
And right now, like, is your customer base, is it mostly New York, or are you guys international, across the United States?
We're about 60% New York, which is a really great place for us to be this early on. If the first year we were like 99% New York, maybe the second year 75, maybe higher, and now we're kind of balancing out. Another great thing that just came to mind is like we work with clubs around the world. So there's some very influential taste-making clubs that aren't necessarily signed by big brands yet. So we just did Atlanta Run Club, one of the most culturally influential clubs in the world. We just made their 2023 race kit, which is going to debut, and we just, to like preheat that moment, we sponsored their Peachtree 10K cheer zone, and it was like an absolute party. We're about to unveil Enbro out of Copenhagen is one of the most, like outside of maybe a club in Paris, like probably the most influential club in Europe. And we just made their 2023 race kit that's coming out at the Copenhagen half, second fastest half in the world. It's like a global destination. People love it. It's like net downhill. It's such a great time. So that's another way we're reaching customers and showing up authentically and showing up with like fashion forwardness. And yeah, it's been really productive.
Exciting. Okay, I have 2 more questions, and then I want to make sure we got time for everyone else. How do you guys measure the success of your community? Kevin, you're kind of exempt from this one. Mr. I don't track any data. And so Jackie and Tim, we'll leave this one for you.
I'll take it. As a former engineer, I pay a lot of attention to metrics and KPIs. But I think, again, it kind of goes back to like looking all the way through the funnel. So when you're talking about top of the funnel, new customer acquisition, some of the metrics that we look at are like social engagement. So like I mentioned before, if we have a post that goes viral on TikTok, it brings in a lot of new customers. That's an indicator that we should probably keep going with that avenue of content. But then further down the funnel, one example is that we send out 2 marketing emails a week. Our Tuesday marketing email is kind of more of a hard sell, and our Friday email is a newsletter. That newsletter has been there from the beginning. It's never a hard sell. It's kind of behind the scenes. It's funny. It shares a little bit about ourselves. We just have like team pictures. That has had our highest open rate historically, and also drives a lot of revenue. So that is an indicator that that's a successful initiative, and that's building community, and people are looking forward to it because it also has a very low unsubscribe rate. So those are all metrics that indicate that that's a successful avenue to go down, and we should continue on that initiative.
Is there anything that you do for the people, because I imagine just with the product category, it's like for some people this is endemic. It's a really big problem in their life. Are there any moments like that that you engineer for those people?
We haven't been as good at that, but we did have a series for a while where we were giving away a gift card for a top review of the month, and we were picking that sort of randomly, but we were sharing those reviews with the entire subscriber base, so they would see a review, and it was generally someone who had been like very effusive about how much we had helped them. So I think that's an opportunity to like pull in your customers and say like, and like reward them for for evangelising for your brand.
So, and as the business grows, you get more and more customers. In theory, more people who love the brand.
Mm-hmm.
How are you thinking about that strategically? How does that change your strategy? And this is kind of filtering into question 7.
That's a good question, and I don't know that we've thought about it strategically, but it's definitely something that we want to bring in more. I think these guys have built amazing communities, and I would love to be able to do that too. I think maybe putting them front and center in our ads and being more like testimonial based would be a really good way to kind of make them feel like they're part of our team.
Mm-hmm. And Tim, just to kind of circle back to you, are there any key metrics you do on the community side?
Yeah, anecdotally, I keep a really close eye on our Instagram engagement rate because Bandit is the most engaged with brand in running on Instagram.
Yeah, it's what's the metric exactly? It's like
well,
20%.
so we have a relatively small audience. We've got about 26,000 followers. So like inherently, we're gonna have a great engagement rate. So we just look at pure comments and shares. We on average have, and like your comment section is like kind of a really, for me, it's a great way to like understand if people feel as part of a community. They're like comfortable. There's a dialogue. We're riffing back and forth. Like go into some comments. It can get kind of fun in there, and it's a really great way to understand if people feel comfortable and feel like we have a real community here. If you have a brand and your comment section is desolate, or you're like prompting, hey, like comment below like what race you're going to be at, and it feels forced or like you're being marketed to, I think, and it's kind of like a desert in there, it's probably not a great sign. And I really like making sure that we have a really vibrant comment section. So anecdotally, I look at that. Email open rates and click rates are really important to us. And then our cohort analysis is the most important one. When we meet customers at real life experiences, at our marathon pop-ups, those customers are a zillion times more productive than a customer that we meet through Facebook. So that's why we've shifted a lot of our resources into being on the ground, meeting customers, elevating their marathon experience, making them feel special, partying with them like after the race, doing all of these things. They're going online for a new pair of running shorts and they're thinking like, I don't know that team. I've never met those guys. I hung out with the Bandit guys though after Chicago, had a great time. Like we're winning customers over one by one. One, because it's a great business strategy, but mostly because like we love it. And our internal team is just a bunch of like marathon freaks. So including myself. So it's just come very naturally to us.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think all three of you guys talked about doing things that don't scale, and those being the major drivers of your growth, respectively. Let's top us off here just quickly. What is your strategy looking like going forward? How's that changing?
Nice. I don't think we're going to quantify our community ever, is like probably how and we'll see. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. Definitely, we're going to keep investing in that Facebook group. I think that community has really been like the heart and soul of, I think, this brand for a very, very long time. And it's always a direct relationship that our community members can have with us. So we're always going to be in there. If anyone wants to like throw up a complaint about something or give us feedback, like we're going to be in there to respond. Outside of that, we actually are possibly going to try other things. So one tool we've spoken to is Inveterate, which allows you to run a membership program just like directly on your website. It's paid. So there are a few brands who are doing this where you can allow any traffic coming to your website, or even like we can even put this in the Facebook community if people really want, but you can offer membership benefits, like obviously discounts site-wide. You can give them free gifts. You can give them early access to like new drops, new flavors. So that's something that I think we'd be curious to test out. We've done like an ROI analysis. It looks pretty interesting, but it's always going to be separate of our Facebook community, which is always going to be free.
That's really interesting. Yeah, been hearing rumblings of membership model. I think it just changes the dynamics of a consumer business too. Very interesting. Jackie, what's your take?
Our strategy going forward is to pull almost any hard sell out of our funnel beyond like very top of funnel where we're telling our brand story. So once someone has heard the brand story once, we're not going to beat them over the head with, product values, et cetera. And we're going to replace all of that with marketing focused on our internal team. And it's not to make it about us, but it's to put a face and a personality behind the brand. And once someone has heard the story, they don't need to hear it again. And we think that will bring a lot more community to our brand.
Awesome. And Tim?
Yeah, so we have a membership. We've had it since we launched. And so I started the company with just socks. We ran for a year, and then I shut it down for a year to kind of recalibrate the mission, the vision, work on our full head-to-toe line. And as soon as we came out, it was like, all right, how do we reward all my best friends who helped us get to this point? And so we created the membership, which gives everybody early access, standing discount, free shipping on every order. We have Instagram close friends where it's all behind the scenes shenanigans. So you get in there. You get a free gift every year. This year it's 2 pairs of member socks. And we're really doubling down on that. So we'll see, once people are acquainted with Bandit and really loving us, and honestly, we designed it so that it makes a lot of, like, if you're going to shop with us twice over the course of a year, you should just be a member, because financially it makes sense. Oh, you also get a $50 gift card that never expires. So just driving more members, more loyalty, and making it very easy for them to shop with us.
And just for everyone, because I think the memberships model is interesting, has that been like the main driver of growth for you guys?
So it is interesting. The way we do our drops, we come out with a seasonal collection, and members get 24 hours of early access. And then people who are shopping with us for the first time who don't have a membership realize that by the time it opens to the public, a lot of things are already sold out. And so the only time we ever put the membership on sale is like 2 days leading up to a drop, and then 1 day after the drop. And those are our highest days where we get new members, because you missed out and you're like, I should have gotten early access. I'm rambling and forgetting your question, but
Is it been successful?
it's been successful. People love it. We've had trouble. It's like our membership grew too fast and we didn't have enough products, and then members got sold out on, which is a terrible experience because they're paying $100 to like get early access. So it's been a learning experience. We're trying to get it right, but overall, our retention, we just came up on the 1 year mark. It's like very, very positive signs that people are loving it and sticking around.
Very cool. So let's move, guys. Thanks for bearing with us. Open QA. Go ahead.
Okay. I have some questions.
Can you guys all hear him, or do you want me to repeat the question?
Well, no, I'll speak loudly. I was just.
Speak loudly, yes.
Okay. So. Okay. Can you go to someone else? I gotta read.
Okay, do we have another person?
Yes, thank you for sharing your stories. Very inspiring. My name's Ravel Reyes. I'm starting a nootropics company called Gamamon, and I really resonated with a lot of your stories. I have 2 questions. First of all, Kevin, what's the name of that bot you used on Reddit?
Everyone always asks me this question.
Well, while you think of that, my
Yeah.
second question is, can you talk to us a little bit about some of the things that you regret not doing, or some of the mistakes that you learned from? Because obviously you're kind of like putting a lot of experience in just like 20 minutes, 30 minutes of us just like chatting here. But if you could recall any good learning experiences that we can benefit from as founders, it'd be great.
Yeah, I think this sounds like obvious advice perhaps, but like, I think one thing we regretted was not also building in public on TikTok. I'm like a little too old for the TikTok generation and like too young for something else. But like, we did the Facebook groups because that was where our audience lied. And then like looking back, we were sharing so much publicly and like building in public. There we were like, we could have just duplicated that on TikTok as well. And like, I think we would have had a pretty big audience by now. That's like a very simple thing.
Yeah, I would say I also regret not building in public at all and not putting myself out there sooner. I wish that, if I had started building up my personal brand 5 years ago, that would build my brand even more than it was. So I would say, like, put yourself out there as much as you can. That's like my number one tip. And then, I don't know, are there other areas you're curious of beyond community? Just in, okay. Okay, let me think. Do you have a good answer?
Not really, no.
I'll second what both of them said regarding building in public.
I do have a regret. I wish I had started with one SKU. You can put all your emphasis on one product, and I would highly recommend, like, even if you think like one's not enough and people want to come and see a variety, one is enough. Like, literally, I launched with 12 products. 11 of them we never sold again. One of them is still, to this day, our bestseller. And if I had just started with that, I could have saved so much money and grown.
Let me ask you a question on that. Would you have known that was going to be the bestseller, though? Was there a chance that if you didn't make multiple products, you wouldn't have found the hero?
I think I should have known that it would have been the best, but I didn't know what I didn't know. But, like, it should have been obvious, probably.
Let's expand on this, though, because it sounds like you did product testing early on. How many SKUs did you test?
Well, we only had 3 flavors when we launched. But, sorry, what do you...
Did you test a variety? You mentioned you went through like 200 iterations of product.
Oh, well, yeah, that was... We had 200 versions of our product, but during R&D. But in terms of, like, the flavors, when we were demand testing the flavors, we basically did some research to figure out, like, okay, what could be like the top 20 flavors to launch with? And then we did a combination of quantitative, qualitative testing. So we definitely ran like Facebook ads just to use CTR as a proxy for whether a certain flavor was more interesting to folks.
Do you think that was efficacious, though?
It's interesting because it definitely gave us our number 1 flavor, but our 3rd flavor, which is Tom Yum Shrimp, which I think most people, unless you live in bicoastal regions, maybe you don't know what that is. Like, that is our worst performing flavor. And in our ad tests, it was like one of our top 3. And maybe we should have like isolated from like a geo standpoint and like removed some of the bias from bicoastal regions. But yeah, that definitely was not like our top performing. So yeah, data sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't.
Just to follow up to what you were saying.
Yeah.
Actually, launching with one SKU, but planning to upsell at the Shopify basically 2 other SKUs. Do you think maybe that's a good strategy? Maybe anyone can answer that?
Yeah, I think it could be a good strategy. I mean, one might be like extreme, like, but start as small as possible, I think, is the advice I would give you. You'll learn a lot even just from 1, 2, 3 SKUs, but definitely centering around a hero product just makes your marketing, makes it easier to build on, and it gives customers less choice. People really don't want a ton of choice. So I would say definitely that's one thing that I always tell people that I wish I had done.
I have one more thing for the regret. Not just building in public on TikTok, but LinkedIn. It's crazy to me that I now consider LinkedIn an actual social network, and I'm like, I'll actually browse the newsfeed. I think especially for your audience of nootropics, where it's like probably pretty productivity and just like work oriented in some ways, like people there are gonna love it, and they drive so much free traffic for you.
Go ahead.
So for how much, like in the beginning, how much was your marketing product driven versus community driven in your marketing and your ads? And how do you think, if you were to look back, what would you do differently if you were to actually market your product? Because I know you were just selling socks initially, but that's obviously a product kind of oriented strategy from what I'm assuming, like why you pivoted a year and then did the brand the second time. So yeah, that's basically like what percentage of like was most effective for product versus community, and like the time frame of the result, I guess.
Sure. Yeah. So I was pretty open about the fact that it's not super hard to make a great sock. We could 100% all of us figure it out. I figured it out. It's just research. You just have to figure out like the fabrics and test them, put them to the test. They need to be sweat wicking. They need to be breathable. They need to stay up. They need to be comfortable and have some cushioning. And I think that the sock was great, and the sock spoke for itself, and people loved it. And honestly, like, there was a great running hat brand out there, and there's great running shoe brands, but there wasn't like a namesake like Kleenex running sock brand at the time. You could argue like Bolegas or Bombas are features, but they're like in snowboarding and hiking, and like people want, like, I want it for running, and I want you to specialize in that, and I like products that way too. And so the product was a great product, but the entire 100% of the emphasis was on community. It was the only Instagram posts that we put up were about the community. I don't think we ever like had a picture of like lay flat socks. We never really talked about the performance quality outside of like on the PDP. It was like, you see my friends and people in all of these different run clubs across like Boogie Down Bronx to We Run Uptown to Brooklyn Track Club and Goldfinger and like all these clubs, and you're like, I'm down with this because these people are awesome. They're having a great time running. They look stylish, and I want that. And the way Bandit expanded was because it's a very happy accident of socks, great starter product. Low minimums, high margins, repeat product, identifiable on the body, light to ship, and you know, I could order. I think the first batch was like 200. Took me like 30 days to sell out, and then 2 months went by, and in the meantime, I was just posting pictures of all of these awesome people wearing the sock, and it pent up so much demand that when I put 600 pairs up for the site and announced like new drop tomorrow, more socks, they sold out in 5 minutes. And then 2 months go by, I made my money back, put in a new order, same thing, 1,200 pairs gone in 5 minutes, and it just like built on itself. And that FOMO is like really, really important, though everybody's getting really, really smart and will know if you're faking it, and like there's no way that's sold out or whatever it is. Like, people are manufacturing that like supply and demand, and you'll get kind of, if you get busted for it, it's not a good look, and you just need to be really smart. And like people see like, oh, you know, back in stock, like, you know, a week later, you might have just taken your products down. And 100% like for products that weren't moving, you have to manufacture a little bit of that. But ultimately, like, I think that that's a really good strategy. Like, if people can't get their hands on something, it makes them want it more. But make sure that it's coming from a genuine place, and you're not just like using it as a marketing strategy, which is tough, but you can definitely do it.
Do we have? You want to?
Follow up on that.
All right.
So when you were saying how, is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay. When you were saying how like in the beginning you were taking pictures of just cool normal people that probably was more accessible. Now you're a fashion forward brand, right? So like when was it in that process of just building the brand when you were like, okay, we want to actually create clean aesthetic, creative direction that's more fashion forward, and how has that played an impact in like revenue versus your authentic self that was like a camera dude and just like shooting stuff? And are you gonna go back to that? Like, are you still testing?
So, I mean, a lot of our content was user-generated. I wasn't out there with a camera. I hired a photographer to shoot the drop photos and what you would see on the website, and that was about the only time I could like swing a photographer in New York City, calling in a lot of favors, help, you know, friends and whatnot. But and you got to do that as well. And we're still like scrappy as hell. But ultimately, as things evolved, and we still use user-generated content, our bar has gotten a lot higher for what we repost, and it has to be like a good-looking photo, and like you have to have some personality, and it's got to be like, you know, I'm not just gonna post like, you know, people will this is such a weird thing in runners. People will tag every brand that's part of their fit. That's not making it up. So just being a little bit more choice as we've evolved and grown, reducing cross-branding as much as possible and really making it feel owned. Like when we were just socks, it was really hard, and we would make sure everyone's like in just Nike otherwise, and not a million other brands. Today, as I'm the creative director of our campaign, it's like creativity is king. Like my favorite brands are streetwear brands like Stussy and ALD and Kith, and there's some more niche brands like Greg Laboratory and Libero, and like that are just like putting out content that gives you the chills on their collections. This brand Libero just did a new collection, and their whole campaign was shot from the perspective of a surveillance camera that followed around these fake mobsters in their clothes. And it was like print out photos with like their shirts circled with like arrows, and it was just so dope. And it's like people eat that up, and the bar is getting raised. And in running, everything is like a stock photo. Same stride, same smile, same turn down the street. And you just have to stand out by just like being really creative, and you can do that on a shoestring budget. We've been able to do it, and we'll hopefully continue to do it.
Who else?
Hi, everybody. My name is Ariela. I'm a co-founder of Sally, a fashion brand. Right now, it's a side hustle. So from all of your stories, it sounds like you also started this as a side hustle. When did you know, if you knew, how to make that jump between I have a full-time job, I'm doing this, it's going well, but I can't yet quit my job because I can't pay my salary, like that kind of, what was your story? What advice would you have for someone that's currently in that situation right now?
I'll give my very quick answer. Don't do what I did, which is run through my entire savings. So I was young enough when I started Bandit that I knew I could bounce back. I had a great job as a product manager, and I risked it all. Negative $500 in my bank account the day that I raised money to go full-time on Bandit. So do not recommend that. And hopefully you can get there a lot sooner. But I do really believe in like taking a big bet on yourself, jumping, just full confidence. Like you'll have a backup plan and just be ready. But like you gotta take the leap. So that's my story, and yeah.
I can give my take. I'm kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. I maybe waited too long, but I waited until I could basically replace my salary from my previous job. But that being said, as soon as I left and pursued it full time, our revenue increased like pretty dramatically. But I'm very risk averse, and I wouldn't necessarily say like take the lead. I mean, at some point you do have to, and it's like, do you believe in it enough that it can grow? But I would say, if you're not initially raising money, if you want to do it bootstrapped and profitably, which is what I did too, and I strongly believe that that's the way to go in the beginning. I would say wait until there's actually a book called Profit First and Fix This Next, same author, but he talks about this like a strategy for determining like what you actually need your business to be making in order to leave, and I would highly recommend those books.
Do you want to take this?
Those are great answers. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you guys for all the great advice. I'm a software developer, right, Jonathan? I know you mentioned Venerate. I'm wondering what kind of, what you guys, everyone's making apps or software around communities because they know that communities are a big thing now. What kind of things are you guys looking for in the software or apps that are being sold to you guys to make, like, to test against your communities?
So I think as someone who used to run a community, especially for product managers, we ran that one on Slack, and this is the advice like I always tell anyone who's looking to start a community is like, don't overthink your community platform. Like, we live in an age of abundance where switching costs are so easy. Like, everyone thinks you have to find the best software out there, and the truth is you just have to meet your users where they are, right? Like product managers were already on Slack, like with their engineering and design teams. Like why make them switch to like a Facebook group or Discord when it makes them look like they're not working during the day? For us, like our audience was already on Facebook groups, and so these days I actually am pretty skeptical of most community platforms. I've seen them all. I've tried a lot of them. I think like for a lot of digital creators now, like the only one I find like interesting is circle.so, which lets you embed the community as almost a forum directly on your website. But outside of that, I would just say like, yeah, meet the user where they are. And I know that wasn't the answer you're looking for, but.
We use Circle as well. Good platform. Anyone else? Go ahead.
Hi, thank you all for sharing and really great insights across the board. My name is Jess. I work for a marketing company. I know at the beginning you kind of mentioned how traditional advertising is really on the decline and getting more expensive. So I'd love to hear like what your most effective channels have been, both from a revenue standpoint, but also in really continuing to build and maintain the communities that you already have from all the other great stuff that you're doing.
For us, our strongest channel has always been Google. We have a product where people are looking for a solution. I invested a lot in SEO initially in terms of not money, but my time. It takes a long time to build up your SEO presence. It's still one of our biggest initiatives. So I think people forget about Google, but not a lot of people do SEO well. So if you can do that effectively for a brand, and the way we did that was just writing blogs that answer questions that people might be asking. So it's pretty simple. But the problem with Google is that it's not necessarily scalable. So like you can only, like people have to initiate the search, whereas Facebook, you can put yourself in front of them, or TikTok or Meta, all those platforms. So at some point, if you want to keep scaling, you have to invest in those platforms. For us, organically, TikTok has been the most successful. TikTok, people are going to discover new things. They're not going to see their friends and family, whereas Facebook and Instagram, people generally are. They want to see people that they're familiar with, and I think it's a hard sell to get someone to follow a brand unless you're doing something really fun and exciting. So I would say if you're looking for new channels or if you're starting a business, TikTok is better than the other social platforms for that.
I can speak on this too, just because this is what I do. I think that it's really interesting. Like when I speak with our clients, the landscape's changing a lot. That's what I discussed, and there's just less margin because of a lot of these privacy changes to, basically create demand through paid platforms, right? And that's what I think you need to think about from a marketing strategy perspective. What are the best places for us to generate demand and unlock scale? And that could be like organic TikTok. It could also be organic search. But I think there are so many channels available now today. Reddit, TikTok, there's tons of different ads. So it's just a question of where can you meet your audience? Where does that make sense for that business? Which I think everyone here really touched on. So it's just getting harder, but there are more channels available. Other questions? Go ahead.
I can take that. I started with Google pay per click because then you're only paying when someone like actually clicks through to your site. And if you have something like a hook that's really strong, like a reason why people would be searching for that, then it's likely that they will shop from you, or more likely than if you just throw your picture up in front of someone on Facebook, they might click through, but they might not have no intent of shopping. So that's why I liked Google initially. My next step was Facebook and Instagram. At the time, TikTok didn't even exist, I don't think. So that was the natural next step. And again, I would if I were to go back, I would start with just like a super small budget, like just kind of think about the customer journey. Like if someone's new to you, what do they need to know to be convinced to shop from your brand? If someone's seen you before, how do you like get them to re-engage with you? And just kind of think about it that way and build out even just like a very basic ad funnel. Then you'll probably have the best results. You can also do just like a simple retargeting campaign on Facebook where like anyone who came to your site, when they go out again on the internet, they might see your thing pop up, your brand pop up, and that's a pretty, generally has a pretty good return on investment in the beginning. So I would recommend starting there and then building out. Lucas could probably answer what my ad budget is better than I could, or what it's spread across, but it's pretty evenly split, and it gets kind of reallocated based on what platform is performing the best at that time.
Yeah, I think Jackie touched on something really important, which is to understand if your customers are already like searching for products in your space. I think for us, when we went on like Ahrefs to do our SEO research, we realized that there wasn't really any search volume for like healthy ramen or like low carb ramen because it just never existed before. No one knew that ramen could be that way. And so for us, we knew that growing through SEM in the early days was going to be pretty expensive. Just there isn't any search volume there. The other thing we noticed was like, we're obviously a very visual product. Like, you know, you can make ramen look nice. And we had a lot of like different value props we could call out with the low carb, high protein, plant-based. So actually Meta worked really well for us and continues to work really well from a contribution margin standpoint. It also just happens to have like great ad inventory. And then TikTok will be next, and then SEM is last for us. But we do influencers and everything as well.
I'm just curious, just to center the question too, for both of you guys, at what point, like Jackie, right after you got product, were you on Google? Were you like, I'm gonna?
Yes, I like inherently knew that Google would be the best avenue for us because like my whole journey I'd been searching Google, and that's kind of the first place someone goes if they have a problem. I don't think I launched Facebook ads for maybe like 2 years, but I started like very small and very slow in the beginning. If I had known more, I probably would have started more in the beginning.
And for you, Kevin?
When we launched our first month, we ran no ads. Our community and our waitlist carried us, and that worked really well for a while. And then obviously it's going to slow down because you tap out of those audiences. And it's like right after that, we just turned on Meta and tried to optimize Meta and make it work. And then once it became our quote unquote like cash cow engine, then it could fund innovation into other experimental channels like the TikTok, Google, and influencer marketings of the world.
Yeah, I think once you commercialize like a mass market social channel like Meta, which is usually where a lot of spend gets segmented at scale, then you can think about layering on more experimental things like these guys are talking about. I think the important thing to note though is like each of them had like a gut feeling about where revenue was going to come from off the cuff. You built up a big enough community, you were like, this is going to drive substantial revenue, whatever that number was. Jackie was like, there's probably a good amount of search demand on Google where, you know, I could float the business and grow this thing off Google. So I think that's the question you should ask yourself, like, where are my shoppers going to be and what is that gut feeling? I think always start there.
I would also just not diversify at all in the early days. Like, I think I didn't know anything about marketing when I started this business, and I have like originally I was like, oh, we got to test everything and we got to see what works, and everyone was like, no, you just pick one channel and you make it work, and that will fund everything else. And I don't know why I just like, you know, thought maybe I should keep experimenting, and probably wasted a lot of money like in the early days doing that. So now I just tell everyone just focus on one and get it to work.
Other questions here? Go ahead. Sounds like a software plug. If anyone has a favorite software.
I use Judge.me. It's an app on Shopify. It's been good. I think like any of them probably work, but definitely like trying to capture as many as possible and get kind of an email flow set up like from the very beginning, so that like anyone who comes to your site, they have an avenue to leave their email address. I think that's what's important, is just, and then once they're in your funnel, then you can ask them for reviews, and just be like super transparent, and just be like, hey, we're trying to grow our brand, like any feedback would be great. And you can ask them a couple times. They might not do it the first time, but maybe the second time they will. Say, we're a small business and we want to grow, and your feedback's important. Just that kind of honesty and transparency people really, really resonate with.
So I think we have time for one more.
My name's Brian. I'm building a platform that identifies customers and lowers email marketing bills. And this goes back to talking about MER from the start. The cost of marketing has gone up because of all the things we talked about, but is there anything that you're focusing on that is overall lowering the cost of reaching customers, getting in front of them, and better targeting with email, SMS, or paid ads?
On the paid ad side, so our growth manager came from videography background, and we hired him for a very specific reason, because media buying is just totally different now in your ads manager. Like, you can rely on ASC campaigns, and you don't really have to touch your ads manager that much. So our growth manager and our media buyer are basically investing all of their time in building a creative pipeline. So we work with script writers, we have video editors. They set up their own shoots they don't do it in the US, it's crazy expensive. They rent studios in like Canada, hire models there, and then like write their own scripts and set up their own shoots. And they're doing things like they study psychology books on like the 16 like psychological just like things that most consumers are always thinking about, and you're constantly just testing that in our creative and our copy. And I think that's really the way to win in Meta. Because you're not going to win from like a media buying or a budget standpoint versus the big brands.
I'll touch on that. If you're interested in like implementing a creative program at scale, I'm going to talk about just kind of a newsletter in just a second. We just gave a talk exactly about this point on Tuesday that you can definitely watch. If anyone here is trying to launch Meta and think about how to actually deliver creative that will perform, the media buying game today is a creative game. So I think that's where a lot of effort's going. What I see on the portfolio side is it's going into retention, especially for more mature businesses, community, the whole purpose of today's talk, and then some more experimental channels like closed loop ad ecosystems where privacy hasn't affected them so much, like Amazon, for instance. Very curious about your Amazon business, by the way. And so I think that's where people are focusing now. Go ahead. I think, yeah, no, for sure, go ahead.
What percentage of your marketing in the beginning versus now that you see like the value of building trust not through selling, but rather through implementing a relationship? And all of you guys do this, but like your ability and your kind of patience to say, we're not driving any revenue now through this, but like when did you kind of feel and see that impact through just being super patient on building that rapport as like a close friend as opposed to a customer?
I actually think you might be better at answering this.
Can you simplify the question for me just a little bit?
Like basically there's like marketing isn't like person, right? It's basically building trust as a close friend and building that connection with someone, with a person, not a customer, right? So like basically like at what point and like what levers did you kind of see really work to say, all right, in 1 year, this is going to drive growth as opposed to like I'm not having shit right now.
Yeah, okay, I gotcha. For me, it's just intuition and kind of understanding the moment that you're at and the size of your audience and what they're reacting to. We have a bi-weekly newsletter called the B-Mail where the intro is nothing short of ridiculous, and it's very casual, a lot of slang and mumbo jumbo, and that has become like the only place where we kind of speak like that. In our captions, we're now on Instagram, we're now a lot more simple and sophisticated and in line with what you see higher end streetwear brands. I looked back at an email I sent like 6 months ago, and it was like, guess what, guys? We have customer service now. And it was like very immature and ridiculous, but it was like perfect for the moment. And people like love that transparency. Now, like we can't act like that. So I think it's just like really feeling it out, and then staying true to like some channels, like you can always be like that, and other channels you'd be different.
Like, that's good that that happened, though, right? The one that, so that the fact that you said they have customer service now, because it kind of shows your personality as a brand. But obviously, like, you're always maturing and iterating on your brand, especially with the aesthetic of like streetwear and like implementing that aspect to a different industry. Do you think that your customers and your community, you feel that they appreciate the maturity that you have now, as opposed to being that like super tight knit, not like tight knit, but like that different kind of connection of like, yo, I'm like your bro instead of like I'm like a leader? Or do you think that's just not scalable enough, and that's why you do it?
We are, I am the voice of the brand. I was thinking about my first answer about like, I don't ever put myself in front, but it is my voice. I write all of our copy, and like, you have to come, I kind of joke about this, like as a customer, like, especially if you're a new customer and you don't know us, like don't come complaining in the comments about something like that isn't very real. For example, somebody was like, where's my thing? I ordered it 10 days ago. I'm like looking up their order. I'm like, hey, sorry. So it looks like you ordered that 3 days ago. And like, it's like, we'll correct, like we're gonna be people behind it. And we're not gonna like act like a corporation in the comments. And like, we're always gonna talk to you as a human. It's like, so sorry about that. Like extended O's and like, just like being real and not like having like ChatGPT write your copy, I think is really, really important. So to an extent. Do you want to?
I can answer. I would say your point of sale needs to be as professional as possible. Basically, everywhere else you should kind of be casual. At least that's what has worked. I started off thinking like everything has to be polished and professional, and we need to look like the biggest brand. And then people treat you like the biggest brand, and they expect their product to be there the next day, and they don't really give you any leeway if you make a mistake. If you are honest with them and you're like, we're a small team, we're doing the best we can, and then keep that kind of casual, friendly attitude on, like, I would say everywhere except your point of sale. Your point of sale should be perfect, but everywhere else you can be as casual as you want, probably for as long as you want. In your content, yeah, across social, on email, that stuff, that the more casual and behind the scenes we've been, the better that content has performed.
All right, guys, I'm going to cap us off here just because we're over. But thank you guys so much for coming. It was incredible. Yeah, really engaging stuff. We're going to be doing this more often here at Shopify for office hours. If you guys are interested in like the more expert level topics where they're like serious deep dives, I would recommend sign up for the newsletter, darkroomagency.com/newsletter, or just follow us on Instagram. And we have another event series called Night School that's a lot more in depth.